Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fantasy Cricket Podcast, where we're going to preview the final nobody expected. I'm not really sure if it's a final or an eliminator, to be honest. Still got a hangover from the IPL format. Two of the supposed best teams in the tournaments are going to be meeting. Asa, how are your feelings on the issue?
Do you mean the two of the supposed best teams of the tournament are not going to be meeting? So, hello, Nick. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, well,
Rather,
I mean,
two of the best teams in the tournament are not going to be meeting. The two of the supposed best teams are going to be meeting. So, yeah, that's right.
I don't know.
Finally
I've got a
got
headache
it.
now.
Yeah.
But if you're an Australian or a Kiwi fan, you're gonna argue differently. I think if you're a Kiwi fan, you might have some basis to say you do belong, and I think New Zealand cricket's deserving of where they are at the moment. They've been very consistent in this format. Australia a little bit more of a surprise. I don't think even the most stalwart Australian fan ever expected them to get to where they are now, but yeah, good for them.
Yeah, good for them. They won against Pakistan, which I always have the feeling that if a team goes into the sort of knockout stages of a tournament not having sort of lost any blood previously in the tournament, they're a big risk because they haven't really gone through that adversity as a side in that environment yet, and that's often an important part for teams, unless you're like that dominant Australian side of 2007 or 2003, where you don't need to taste blood because you're just by far and away the best team in the world. But long story short, let's just say this tournament has been exciting to watch, but it's probably not the best way of measuring who the best, which the best team in the world is for T20 cricket at the moment. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we might have some angry people tuning in who disagree, but the likelihood of that being the case is pretty low. As a quickly then, this match has been played in Dubai again, as was the Pakistan-Australia semi-final. I read reports somewhere saying that they didn't think dew played a big factor in that semi-final. I feel like the death bowling towards the end was a little bit hampered by dew. I don't know. That was just me watching the game. But regardless, the fact is that semi-final, like the first semi-final, was won by the team who won the toss. So, again, that's going to play a big role.
It's going to play a role. So, just if you look at the stats stadium-wise for T20Is, Dubai is the most toss-agnostic of the three. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to depend on the toss. Toss is going to have a big role to play here. Now, the team batting first has won 48% of their matches out of 27 matches. And the average first innings total is 143, which means that the toss is going to have an effect, and it seems like batting second is going to be in your favor as well. Having said that, New Zealand have batted first twice, and so have Australia in this tournament. And New Zealand seem to be doing much better when they bat first. They have an average score of about 183, and Australia are looking at about 169. There's really not much to say here, Nick. New Zealand are the favorites coming to this match, aren't they?
Well, I think we've covered the ground. Let's move on to some team news, and that's Devon Conway punched his bat a little bit too hard, and I think that's going to be a bit of a miss as far as they're concerned, because he really was. I think without Devon Conway's performance last game, they lose the match, and I don't say that just because he scored 46, striking at 121. I think him and Mitchell consolidating. Set up a platform then for once Conway started to accelerate, eventually then let Neesham come in and just let Neesham tee off. I suppose the counter argument is you knew that they had to tee off. Whoever came in would have to tee off, but they didn't lose wickets, and they put on, 80 plus, 90 run plus partnership. So I think Devon Conway being injured could tip it in Australia's favour. Seifert comes in apparently. I'm not really sure what he's about. I'll be honest, I don't know much about him. I know he's shown promise, but I don't know much about him as a player. I've never watched him play.
Yeah, he's still less experienced than Devon Conway. I suppose Kane Williamson might bat up the order. He might even open to make up for this loss for New Zealand. But yeah, it's a big loss. The other thing is that Australia seem to be just hitting their peak in the tournament as well. They've got Mitch Marsh coming in, finding great form. Matt Wade pulled off some heroics there. Stoinis has been in good nick, so it's really coming together for the Australians as well. Mitch Starc can be the most devastating white ball bowler in the world, alongside Shaheen Shah Afridi and Jasprit Bumrah. Let's not forget Jofra Archer, but he's been injured for far too long. So Australia looks strong, but I'd still pick New Zealand to win this. And New Zealand are eyeing a sort of 2.5 triple. They're going to be vying to be the best cricket team ever at this rate.
I mean, they were basically 2 fours away from being limited the 50 over champions as well. So it's quite interesting, I think, to see what they've done. And I think there's no doubt that, as far as everybody's concerned, unless you're Australian, you're probably cheering for New Zealand because they're the nicest guys in cricket. There was a moment against England where Adil Rashid tried to field the ball and Daryl Mitchell, ran into him or something of the like, and he turned down a run because the Kiwis are built different. I'm pretty sure if it was an Australian, he would have taken as many runs as he could have done off that ball. But that's just my opinion. I'm not biased or anything. Australia, what an absolute mammoth performance. David Warner's continuing his good form, but good old Stoino and Matty Wade. Matty Wade with an unbelievable performance there. He really, really... there really aren't many words to sum up what he did. In terms of fantasy points, I mean, that is a hell of a lot he would have got you.
So it was 55 points against Pakistan. It's a good number of points. If you had captained him, it's 100 plus points. And there was nothing really to sort of give you a clue that he was about to do this. The 4 matches preceding that match, he'd been averaging about 20 points fantasy-wise. He didn't bat, having said that, he didn't bat for 2 of those matches, 3 of them actually. But he batted against England where he scored a paltry 18 of 18 runs and got out. So Matt Wade really coming into it from out of nowhere. He's got that sort of pugilist mentality, though. He's been brought into the Australian setup. He's replaced big keepers and then been replaced by them. He's going to then come back as a specialist batsman. He's come back into the Australian side as almost a specialist, just a specialist batsman who's making up the numbers at points, but he still finds a way at times.
As I think at some point, and I could be wrong, but they were putting him down along with Stoinis really as the finisher category, the finisher role, and I think the result speaks for itself. I wonder, we talk about momentum a lot in cricket, particularly in T20 cricket more than anything else. Whether these are 2 teams that are hitting their peak, or whether one or both teams have hit their peak, and it could be maybe not as close a final as we thought.
Yeah, it very much depends, again, going back to how the 2 teams seem to perform in respective innings. It very much depends on the toss and how the team winning the toss chooses to go. Because batting second, as I said earlier, batting first, New Zealand seems to be very dominant. But when it comes to batting second, it's the other way around, and Australia seems to be very dominant. So it could really play into one of those teams' hands. We know coming into this time of year in the Middle East as well that dew is going to play a factor. We know how the temperature changes at night, and because of that, there's going to be more moisture on the grass, and dew will certainly be a factor. So you definitely want to be.
I wonder how many of our Anzac friends are going to be able to watch this game, because I think it must be at some ungodly hour for them.
It might be sort of waking up in the morning at some point for them, depending on which coast they're on.
Yeah. So, viewer numbers are going to be mixed there, but it'll be interesting to see how these two teams approach it as well. I think Australia, Finch came out and said they said that after the England game they decided to be far more aggressive as a team. So I think that's going to work well for them. And I think we touched upon it in the last episode how New Zealand just seem to be a very adaptable cricket team, and that's always an asset, particularly in T20 cricket. But let's jump into a few individuals. And Azza, why don't you give me some thoughts on any individuals from the New Zealand team or the Australian team or both?
Yeah. So I'd like to structure that in terms of competencies. If we can start with wicket keepers, it's a loss, as we just said, for New Zealand from a fantasy point of view, and then you're looking at Matthew Wade coming in at about 8.5 to 9 credits, depending on the app. So that's a great buy, given his recent form. So go for Matt Wade. Tim Seifert. There's just not enough data to show anything about how he's going to perform. So it's difficult to say, really. Then we come to the batsman. So we're looking at just one wicket keeper, by the way. And then we come to the batsman. We have plenty of openers to choose from. We have Guptill, Mitchell, Aaron Finch, Dave Warner. That's those. There you have those four openers. Then of course you have Steve Smith, Kane Williamson. Now these are the big names from New Zealand. You can't go wrong with Darren Mitchell and Martin Guptill. They've been in great form. Mitchell in particular. So that's another good buy.
Mitchell scored 72, striking at 153 in the last game.
There you go. Yeah.
So that's some momentum to be carried in.
Yeah.
Dubai is meant to be having a fresh wicket as well, which means it should be really good to bat on. The ball should be coming on. So I think that's something to look forward to from a New Zealand point of view.
He's also done well against the big players. He's big teams rather. He's scored 96 fantasy points against England, 79 against India, 25 against Afghanistan, where he was sort of instrumental in a way towards their win there. So he's been on a good ride here in this tournament. He'd never opened in his life before the start of this tournament, but that's just the New Zealand way. They back their players to do things. They have some sort of sixth sense or a Yoda element to their playing, which seems to work, evidently. So, just moving on from Darren Mitchell, Kane Williamson has not been in the best of forms, but he is the kind of player who steps up for the big occasion. We've seen that for the World Cup final. Seen that for the Test match against India. So he's a good buy. David Warner is a good buy, but he's expensive. We're looking at 10 credits there. So just keep that in mind for when we come back to Australia. Because moving on to the all-rounders, these two teams are sort of mirror images. They have a left arm spinner who are both sort of all rounders, Ashton Agar and Mitchell Santner. You've got Jimmy Neesham paired up with Marcus Stoinis. And then when you go look at the bowlers, you've got Adam Zampa and Ish Sodhi. And of course, you have Trent Bolt paired up with Mitch Stark. So those are sort of like for likes. Then you have, of course, you have Pat Cummins and Southey. But as a fantasy player, you're looking at which of these two matchups are going to be the better picks.
Yep.
Really.
Yeah,
and if you're looking
I think I'm gonna interrupt you there for a second because I'm gonna really bore out of your voice. I wanna touch upon one thing that I find really interesting about the Australian setup is that they've got a lot of all-rounders in their team. They've got arguably 3 proper all-rounders in their team, right? With Mitch Marsh, with Marcus Stoinis, with Glenn Maxwell. I think that is interesting because that leads them to drop Ashton Agar often. I think Agar hasn't played the last couple of games, whereas New Zealand feel compelled to play Satner because he is a bit of a bowling all-rounder, so that gives them that depth.
Yeah, that's right.
So
the other thing with New Zealand is that they're looking at Santner very much as the frontline spin option alongside Sodhi.
He didn't have a good game last time, Satner.
No,
he didn't take any wickets. He didn't bowl much. I think he bowled one over and then was taken out of the attack.
Yeah.
What about as I just quickly from the Australian point of view? I just wanted to touch upon Mitch Marsh, if you could, for me.
Yeah, Mitch Marsh has had a wonderful sort of last couple of seasons in all formats of the game, really. If you're even looking at Sheffield Shield, one-day cricket, one-day international, T20Is. As you said, he's one of the 3 all-rounders that Australia are bringing in. He's been in imperious form, mostly with the bat. They're looking at Mitch Marsh coming in at number 3 or number 4, depending on match situation and sort of how the openers are doing. But they're looking at him mostly as an enforcer role, and he's doing that role very well. They're looking to build around him with other big players, whereas Mitch Marsh is sort of hitting the big shots. Just to back that up, Glenn Maxwell himself recently said in an interview that Mitch Marsh is hitting the ball the best he's ever seen in all of cricket. Keep in mind, this is a guy who's been in a team with ABD, Virat Kohli. He's been in a team with KL Rahul, previously Mayank Agarwal, Chris Gale, and he's saying Mitch Marsh.
I don't know if you can trust the Australians. These are all mind games.
These might be mind games, but it's got to have some merit to it, doesn't it?
He's been hitting the ball well. There's no doubt about that. He's been smacking it pretty clean. Right, Azza, let's try to wrap up this episode with a couple of things. Let's start off with your captain and vice captain pick this game. If you've thought about that.
I've given some thought to it. I'd definitely be looking at David Warner to either captain or vice captain. That's for sure. Now for the other pick, I'm gonna go with Adam Zampa. We haven't touched upon him yet. We didn't touch upon him in our discussion, but we did for the previous episode, and he sort of did what we expected him to do. So that's more saying about us than Zampa. Really, it's just saying that we're great at what we do. So I'd say go with Zampa and Warner. The only risk with that is that you're going with 2 Australians. So if New Zealand has a big game, you're going to be missing out on some big New Zealand players. So just keep that in mind. Keep in mind Daryl Mitchell.
Physically incapable of picking 2 Australians, so I would probably go, if I had to pick 1 Australian, I'd go for Marcus Stoinis, the old Bitstoin, as an Australian player, because he can always come up with overs as well. And I just think that Daryl Mitchell's worth a shout. He's had 2 really good games back to back. He seems like a player who's got this big game mentality. That's gonna bode well for them, and he can bowl a couple of overs as well. But those are my picks. As matchups,
Good.
any particular matchups you're looking forward to from either side?
Yeah, a few of them really. We're looking at Zampa versus Williamson. Zampa's been in great form. Williamson's historically a very good player of spin, so that's an interesting one. Mitch Stark versus the entire of the Kiwi team. If you go back and see some highlights from what Mitch Stark has done in his prime against the Kiwis, it's well. There's not much to say really if you remember the 2015 World Cup finals, some test series around that time as well. So we're looking at all of those. It's interesting.
Yep. No, I agree. I mean, I think again, there was a shout out from me last game, I think, but again, Bolt didn't take any wickets last game, and he went for 40. So I feel like he's due a performance. Bowling into Warner and Finch, I think he can have Australia in trouble very early on. That's actually going to be my prediction. And my prediction is also going to be a victory for New Zealand.
I would agree. I think our hearts and minds are agreeing with each other at this point.
Yep. I think that's true. And I think on that note, Azza, we can end the podcast for today. And next episode will probably be us starting to preview the India New Zealand series, and then of course in a month's time, under a month's time now, we've got the first Ashes test. So
we've got the Ashes. Yeah,
we've got cricket to look forward to, and I think. For the one or two consistent viewers that are probably our parents and grandparents, they can now expect a weekly episode rather than sort of sporadic episodes every so often. And we're gonna see how that works for a little while. But thanks again, Azza. Thanks for joining me. I'm gonna
give you the next few days also to think about how you're gonna try to be as neutral as you can come the Ashes.
Oh, no, I can be very neutral and still admit that we're going to get absolutely pumped. I don't think we're going to lose 5-0. I think
not 5-0.
I think rain or something might save us at some point, but it's got like a 4-0, 3-0, 4-1, 3-1 kind of thing over it. Yeah.
I'm calling
it's definitely
3-1.
It's going to be an absolute hiding. Yeah. Unless, of course, the English batsmen all just decide to, I don't know, drink the blood of Christ, which is Joe Root's blood in the England team's case. So that might help them. I don't know. That's maybe a bit too blasphemous. Now offended more people.
Might be.
But we'll cross the Ashes when we get to that. We'll cross the India New Zealand series. I don't know what it's called. It's probably called like the Gavaskar Crow Trophy or something. Hadley something. But yeah,
Triple Hadley Trophy.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nick.
We'll see you next week, everyone, and thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks, Nick.